Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this FP&A Trends Webinar, where today we'll look at reinventing FP&A, the top 7 lessons learned from the pandemic. My name is Hans Gobin. I'm the FP&A Trends Ambassador, and I'll be the facilitator for this call today. Just so you know, we are joined by nearly 500 colleagues around the world, 56 countries to be precise, and we've got a great panel of three other members joining us. So stay with us for a packed presentation. And in terms of agenda, what do we have for you today? So we will very briefly look at the evolution of FP&A. We will then go on to look at the top lessons learned from the pandemic, from a process perspective, from a people perspective, and finally technology. Then we'll do some conclusion and recommendation, and finally we will have our exciting Q&A session. It is now a great time for me to introduce my fellow panelists. So fellow panelists, if you would like to turn your webcam on and come and join me whilst I introduce you guys. So first we have Sebastian Privel, who's Senior Director Financial Services at the Coca-Cola company. Who will today talk to us about top process lessons learned, and we'll also go through his transformation case study and bring out the lessons learned from there. And Sebastian is based in Paris. Sebastian, great to have you with us today.
Thanks for inviting me, Hans.
Thank you very much. Let's move on to our second panelist today, who is Christina Lewis, Senior Director, Global Finance at Visa. And she will talk to us about the lessons we've learned from a people's perspective. And she joins us from San Francisco. Hi, Christina. Great to have you with us.
Great to be here today, Hans.
Thank you very much. And finally, we meet Oliver Sullivan, who is head of FP&A Solution Consulting at Unit 4. And he joins us from UK, where I am from as well. And today he will share with us how or what have we learned as far as technology is concerned. Oliver, great to have you with us again.
Thank you so much. Really looking forward to this.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got 3 great panelists, 3 great presentations waiting for you, and of course, the top lessons learned during the pandemic. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you will turn your webcam off and go on mute whilst I go through a few more of housekeeping slides. So, FP&A Trends Group, you guys all know that we're now in 27 cities, 16 countries, 4 continents. You've got a list of all the different countries there. Just lately also, we've started doing FP&A strategic advisory and research, but more importantly, best practice workshops and FP&A consultancy on the demand of our members itself. What is the meeting about today? So it is an hour webinar, hour long. Your participation is via the polling question, so please participate, give us the insight from the polling question. What are you doing within your own organization? Interactive Q&A session at the end of our meeting, so please stay on, ask questions directed to one presenter or to all presenters if you so wish, and do it via the chat box. The presentation is available in handouts for you guys to download. You will also receive a copy of the recording and the presentation after the meeting. After the meeting, when I close it, there is a feedback survey session. It takes about 30 seconds, so please stay and give us how well we did, but also, you know, what are the next sort of topics that you would like to see us talking about. So please do that when I close the meeting. A good time to introduce our technology partner today, who is Unit 4, our sponsor as well. So thank you, Unit 4, for making this possible. And we all know Unit 4 is a global leader in enterprise cloud software for people-centric organization. So thank you again, Unit 4. Now, I've got a few slides that I would like to take you through before we start our main presentation, and it's much more around FP&A evolution. So where were we, where are we now, and where are we heading, basically? So journey towards the leading stage. What was traditional FP&A? We all know it was a very much scheduled approach. We used to play one scenario, but you know, we looked at quarterly forecasting. But where are we moving now? You know, how do we look at our data? How do we look at culture and people? Driver-based modeling, integrated collaborative platform, predictive prescriptive analytics is what we're using, and now we're also starting to bring AI, ML, and RPA. So this is where we're heading, and we're now calling it on-demand multiple scenario management. And all of these points will be touched by our presenters in their slides. So let me also now share with you very quickly our FP&A board maturity model, which was revamped, and we wrote a paper in mid of last year. Most of you know it has 3 state and 5 stages. So the states are developing, intermediate, and leading state, and the levels are basic, developing, define, advanced, and leading. Why we're sharing this with you is you would have seen a lot of people reassessing where they are, where their organizations are during the pandemic, and trying to move up that level. But also you will find what leading organizations are doing in these spaces, and the spaces are leadership, you know. And here you see at the far right here, if you can see my cursor, you are looking at full alignment of organizational plan and forecast, promoting change, analytic-based decision-making, strategic focus. What about those functional skills? If you look at the leading stage now, it's a multi-discipline team approach, so all different types of skills within the team. You're talking about analysts, architect, data science skills, continuous skilling as well, training and investment into people. Very important is business partnering, collaborative. We are now the trusted advisor. Much more important comes along are the softer skills, storytelling, persuasiveness, EQ instead of IQ. And then, of course, team leadership skills that we discussed before. And quickly going through process, which Sebastian will go through as well. Integrated FP&A processes, so cross-organizational. We are no longer focusing on product, on a timeline. It's much more around product and service lifecycle. Agility, something that Oliver will cover as well. Strategic business and operation plans have to be aligned. This will be covered as well. Data analytics, near real-time automated exchange, leading analytical drivers, predictive prescriptive analytics. And then finally, technology integration. That's going to be a key for our meeting afterwards. I've got a quick slide here on top 7 trends that came from one of our webinar earlier in the year. So guys, take time and read through this. We will cover some of these. So let me quickly now move on. And today we'll talk about process, people, and technology. And let me introduce to you my first speaker of the day, which is Sebastian Privel from Coca-Cola Company. And he will take us through how the pandemic was a catalyst of the transformation and give us the process perspective. So Sebastian, over to you whenever you're ready.
Yeah, I'm ready. We can go. So hello, everybody. So when you look back at the pandemic, I mean, it really accelerated some existing trends that we are seeing in our industry. And what was very obvious from the start is that we needed to accelerate decision making, that dynamic resource allocation was key, and we need to ensure that there's more and better accountability of the different stakeholders in the company. So to do so, we did some streamlining of our operations. We also work at developing more integrated and flexible tools in order to speed up our decision process and ensure that we've got one standard of metrics across. And doing that, what is really important was also to invest in people and in tools so that we ensure that we've got the right capabilities for the future. And when we're thinking about capabilities for the future, if you can move to the next slide, please. What was created within the Coca-Cola Company is one new organization which services our center and organization unit, which is called platform services. So the objective of this platform service, which is not only in finance, I mean, you can find this in data analytics, public affairs, marketing, HR, but in the case of finance, it's really about standardizing our ways of working, scaling what can be scaled, digitize, and allow in the end accelerated data to insight so that the business can take faster and better decision. If you move to the next slide. So what does it mean for finance? So basically, before the pandemic, we used to have a traditional financial service center where you would find AP, AR, accounting, treasury type of activities. And then we moved to a financial hub. And in this financial hub, we move a lot of new activities linked to FP&A, marketing, commercial finance, supply chain finance, and so on. So when you think about FP&A, so what happened is that the FP&A teams that were part of the different organization units across the globe, so we're transitioned to these platform services. We have also integrated a new MSP, and this helps us to really upgrade our capabilities and have a team which is no longer local, but it's got a full global scale. And I would say that the challenge that when we did that at the beginning of 2021 is that we also upgraded our ERP in the meantime. And all this transition and changes happened during the first 90 days of 2021, so in a very short period of time. But what it helped us to do is that when you think about FP&A, so I mean, Coca-Cola is present in more than 180 countries. So we used to have a lot of independent local finance team. So we were having one integrated planning tool, but people were using it in a very different ways, sometimes looking at different KPIs, and there was a lot of inconsistency across. Moving all those teams to one central platform, I mean, it really helps to have one team, and we can start standardizing the process and to provide the same level of service across all our organization units. So as such, COVID did not drive this transformation, but was really a catalyst of plans that were already, I would say, in the pipeline. And maybe if it was not for the COVID, maybe we would have waited a bit more because it was quite a big step that we took back in 2021. So now that we have set up this organization, you can move to the next slide. So we are moving to what we call the next generation of FP&A. So the objective is really to focus more on the future. So before FP&A, we used to spend a lot of time trying to understand what happened and look at how we responded and try to predict a bit the future about this. Now it's about developing models that provide us more whys and help us to predict what we think can happen, doing more scenario modeling. And also doing so, we are moving from a very labor-intensive process to a process which is simpler and effortless. So really leveraging some integrated planning platform, machine learning, predictive tools, so that it makes the process much more easier for all the parties involved. And if you move to the next slide. So when we think about this next generation FP&A rollout, I mean, in the end, it's about what we did through 2021. It's to build standard processes and deliverables. When you've got those standards, you can move to one integrated global planning platform. And this is integrated not only because, I mean, it integrates all our businesses and geography, but it's also about integrating our long-range planning to our business plan process, to our rolling estimate process, and our actual reviews. It's also leveraging our driver-based predictive models that help us to do real-time scenario management on a more frequent basis. So our objective is to be able to run scenario on a weekly basis if needed. And that's something that in case of crisis like the pandemic, and pandemic is hopefully will not come back, but I mean, we can experience crisis. quite often. I mean, right now we can think about the Ukraine crisis. So I'm sure that my colleagues in Russia and Ukraine must be running quite a few scenarios right now. And it's also having this integrated platform. So it's about having more self-service with real-time analytics available for our stakeholders. So meaning that you can self-service yourself and you don't need to wait for finance to send out the information. So it's there at the tip of your finger and it's all real-time. And all of this allow us and allow our operations to do resource allocation in a much more efficient way across the business. So if we move to the next slide, and what are the lessons about the pandemic, it's like, first you need to standardize process and deliverables if you want to move to one integrated planning platform. And if you want also to start building some predictive model with the right scenario management capabilities, because I mean, if you don't have one platform and one way of looking at things and working at things, you can not move to this next stage.
Sebastian, thank you very much. Great presentation. Yeah, thank you very much. Great presentation. It's amazing how, you know, the pandemic kind of kick-started or you know, boosted the whole process. But of course, there's a lot of learnings that we can all take from here, which is highlighted on this page. So thank you for that. Let us now ask our audience as to what they've done very quickly in our polling question, which come next. And I am launching it now. So what process change or technique was most important during the pandemic within your organization? Process standardization, integrated and collaborative planning platform, self-service real-time analytics, driver-based model, or scenario planning. So I'll read it again. What process change or technique was most important during the pandemic within your organization? Process standardization, integrated and collaborative planning platform, self-service real-time analytics, driver-based modeling, scenario planning. If you can vote, please, I'll give you a few more seconds. So tell us about what process change or technique was most important during the pandemic within your organization. And I'm now going to close the poll, and I'm now going to quickly share. So we have 22% process standardization, 20% integrated and collaborative platform, 8% real-time analytics, 12% driver-based modeling, and 38% on a scenario planning. So Sebastian, can I have a quick conclusion from you on this, please? Sebastian, you may be on mute.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, no, I think I'm quite aligned with the respondents of the survey. So scenario planning was kind of was really key, especially at the beginning of the pandemic.
Absolutely spot on. So yeah,
and CBW also was quite important along with the scenario planning. So what are the scenario and what resource we put against those scenarios?
Absolutely spot on. Thank you very much for that. Let me now hide this and let us go and ask the other panelists now. So Christina and Oliver, if you can join us as well. We've got another question from Sebastian to you guys. So does your organization have an enterprise-wide planning platform? So Christina, can I ask you that question first? Your answer, please.
Yes, we do have an enterprise-wide platform, and we are a matrixed organization. So the reason it's really important is because it works both across the regions and globally. Also helps us as we're aligning on the priorities for our forecasting and planning.
Thank you very much, Christina. Oliver, your answer, please.
Well, yes, I mean, well, you know, as a vendor of these solutions, yeah, we do, and we use our own solutions. But I think, you know, more to the point, I think that all of those things that Sebastian mentioned really highlights the need for an enterprise-wide connected, you know, single version of the truth platform that allows us to plan and respond to the ever-changing environment in which we find ourselves.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for your answers there. Sebastian, any comments from you before we close off?
No, I would say it's quite a journey, and we did it in a very short period of time, which is, I think, would not be possible. But I think this pandemic offers us really the opportunity to accelerate change in the organization, because people are more ready, I think, to embrace change now than they were prior to the pandemic. So that would be one of the positive outcome of it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So thank you very much for the presentation, Sebastian, and Oliver and Christina. Thank you for your comments. Let us now move on to our next session. So our next session is from Christina, who's Senior Director, Global Finance at Visa, and she will tell us about how people were affected and the lessons they learned. So Christina, over to you whenever you're ready.
Absolutely. Thanks, Hans. Good morning, everyone, and good evening for those in another time zone. As we reflect over our last 2 years, the number one lesson that we learned about people is that your people must be your top priority. So our motto that we adopted was people first. In this next slide, I'll walk you through how our company did just that. So to put people first especially during the pandemic, we wanted to focus on areas that boosted longer term engagement. First, we wanted to focus on providing space and stability. Now, our CEO made a very public commitment early on that there would be no layoffs during the pandemic. And what that did was provide employees at least a sense of stability at work, where the rest of their lives were constantly changing. And the other focus was on keeping employees safe, whether they were working remotely, which the majority of our organization globally was remote, or in the office. That was a top priority. The second piece is a leadership focus. So not just focusing on how we were leaders in our respective markets or in the industry, we wanted to focus on people that were leading people. And we wanted to ensure that our leaders were trained, developed, and also supported, even if that meant providing scripts to certain conversations that needed to be had as our processes were changing. The third piece for the company was a focus on health and wellness. Now, this seems, pretty like what you should do, but this support was central to making sure that our employees felt like they were first. We were providing healthy office spaces, whether it was at home or in the office. We were partnering with local resources globally to make sure that they had access to testing, vaccines, medical clinics, all of those things, to make sure that we were helping them focus on their physical health. We also provided access to wellness and therapy resources to make sure they could focus on mental health as well. And last but not least is communication. That always remains to be important. We were intent on creating a single source of truth globally and across the regions. In this next slide, I want to show a quote by John Maxwell. A leader is one who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. And with that in mind, I'll move to the next slide as we discuss how we zoned in on putting people first in our finance and FP&A organizations. Number one was prioritization. What we call it is ruthless prioritization. We had to make sure that we were focusing on the things that actually mattered and stripping away everything that didn't matter. That meant when it came time for the annual budget, when it comes time for quarterly forecasts, even in our multi-year plan, we had to focus on the process, whether we were doing tops down versus bottoms up. We had to focus on people and their skills, not just their roles, not just focusing on people at mid-level, senior director, manager level. We had to focus on people based on their skills and what they were providing for the company. The second is communication. Communication remains a vital part of FP&A, making sure that we're creating a single source of truth, not just for the numbers, but also for the priorities of the company. If we are focused on investments rather than other types of spend, we need to make sure that we are communicating that, and that is in a single space for everyone to know. So email communications from the CFO, talks with the CFO and the FLT, town hall staff meetings, one-on-ones, all of those were employed in making sure that there was one message from a single source of truth to all of FP&A. And last but not least is employee support for FP&A. Now, we know that often, there are other initiatives that happen company-wide, but oftentimes our FP&A professionals aren't able to participate, especially if it's budget or forecast time. And for initiatives like we used to host this Wellness Fridays, where in the summertime, Fridays at 1 p.m., all employees were able to leave for the day or at least have no meetings. But, you know, in FP&A, we are, of course, always too busy for that. But doing the prioritization, having that ruthless prioritization, communicating those priorities, focusing on the skills and not just the roles, that was critical to making sure that we're able to provide additional employee support for our employees in FP&A. Also, understanding if they've been focused on expenses, if they've been focused on headcount, but they have skills that we can really leverage in areas such as revenue, that comes with, additional employee support there, making sure that we're supporting them. And in the next slide, you'll see a quote that we use. It's by Maya Angelou. It says, "People will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you make them feel." So as part of the employee support, one of the things that we wanted to do is make sure that our employees felt the support and they felt engaged. And on the next slide, I'll talk about stay interviews. Now, a lot of people have heard of exit interviews. That's more of a postmortem when an employee is on his way out the door. But a stay interview is more proactive. It's a structured discussion where individual leaders learn what actions they have to do to strengthen their employees' retention within the organization. And what we've learned is a lot of times it's just about developing their skills. It's about letting them know that we're here to help them develop, to help them progress, and we're leveraging what we already have in the organization, which is our employee resources. So these are some of the things that we did at Visa as we've gone through the pandemic. And then as we've done this, I mentioned before that we did a lot of training and everything, but one of the things that we realized is, hey, we're trying all of these different things, but as leaders, there's only so much you can do in a day. So what we wanted to focus on is that one thing. At the end of many of our trainings, the question was asked, so after everything you've learned, what is the one thing that you can do differently? What is the one thing that you can do better? And I'd encourage everyone here, as you're listening to the presentation, even on processes and technologies, what is the one thing that you can take away that you can do differently? So that's how we did it. Now, our top 2 lessons that we learned after going through 2 years of this, and we're still in it, especially in some of the other countries and in the US, is number 1 is listen to your people. We're very good at telling people what the priorities are. We're really good at understanding, what the margin targets are, and doing the analysis and all of that. But listening to people is where you really learn how to best move forward. The other thing that's just hand in hand with that is leveraging existing resources. Instead of just always looking for the next thing that you have, the next bright employee that you want to bring in, there's often untapped gold in your organization. And so leveraging existing resources that you have, leveraging even existing systems to build that enterprise-wide system. You get that from listening, you get that from leveraging the skills that are already within your organization. So those are our top 2 lessons, and it's been definitely a fun ride, to say the least.
Christina, thank you very much. Great presentation. There's so many takeaways for me. I think for me, health and wellness is the key thing. That drives absolutely everything and pivots everything on its head. Focus on what matters is another thing that I took away. And the stay interview is something really important and interesting, and something that we should all be practicing a little bit more within our own sort of organization. So thank you very much for that. Let me now go through to my polling question and ask our members, what did they do within their organization as far as people and ways of working is concerned? What did your organization prioritize during the pandemic? So my first answer is communication and keeping staff in the loop, flexible ways of working, wellness, ensuring human interaction, and finally, workload. So please vote if you can. As far as people and ways of working is concerned, what did your organization prioritize during the pandemic? Communication. Second, flexible ways of working. Third, wellness, ensuring human interaction. Fourth, workload. I will give it another 5 seconds or so. So please vote. And I will close it now. I am now closing the vote, and I will share it with our panelists. So 28% went for communication and keeping people in the loop. 58% went for flexible ways of working, 8% wellness, and 5% workload. Christina, a quick comment from yourself on this, please.
This is pretty much in line with what we've done at our company and what we've benchmarked with other companies, especially those that are based out of the Bay Area, Silicon Valley.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Of course, everybody had to go with flexible ways of working as being
Absolutely.
the top, and communication. So definitely. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for voting. Just to also let you know that you can keep sending your questions via the chat box, so please do so. We will try and answer a few of them today. The rest we will answer via email. Let me ask the other panelists to now join us, and we've got a question that comes from Christina to all of us, which is around what people change did your organization bring during the pandemic? So Sebastian, if I can come to you, please. What people change did your organization bring during the pandemic?
No, I would say it's pretty much aligned with what happened in Christina's organization. So I think the flexible ways of working, I think that's key, and it's here to stay. And communication also has been reinforced during the pandemic, but I think this trend will continue. And it's communication, but it's more inclusive communication across the organization. So less top-down, and provide the ability to the collaborators to connect better with the leaders. So more proximity, I would say, between the management and the associates in the organization also.
Absolutely.
That's some of the benefit I would say.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Sebastian. Oliver?
Yeah, so the organisation I work for, one of the pillars has always been one of the, the key, the core values has always been people first. So I certainly, felt that really came to life with all of those things that, and I'll echo exactly what Christina and Sebastian points out so far. The flexible working, specifically with young families, and I feel as well there was still that human touch, drinks after work and collaboration, and you still felt part of the team. In fact, in many ways, I wonder if some people felt more part of the team during the pandemic, because there was a lot more communication. So yes, it's certainly been an interesting ride, and like Sebastian says, I hope it's here to stay. The good bits.
Yeah, no, absolutely spot on. There definitely was a lot more communication, but I think the quality of the communication as well increased, and it became the ways of communicating very different as well. Any closing comments from you, Christina?
I think the theme here is communication is key, and our new ways of working are pretty much here to stay. So, just to continue to listen to employees and be engaged is what is key to making it better.
Thank you very much, Christina, and panelists for answering those questions. So let us now move on to our next session, which is from Oliver, and Oliver will take us through the top technology lessons learned during the pandemic. So Oliver, whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much. Yes, so so far we've seen some really good, great, let's say, real life examples of some of those practical lessons that have been learned from the recent events. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time looking at the part that technology has obviously played in supporting or enabling some of those behaviours. And I think some of the positive outcomes that have been highlighted so far, I think that's really key to point that out. So really in this little section, as you know, mainly about the technology side of things, so from a technological point of view. And many of you would have heard me say this in the past on some of these sessions, is that technology is only the enabler. It is not by itself inherently the solution, although I think in this particular case, you could quite easily argue that technology was both the solution and the enabler, or both the enabler and the solution, I should say. Let's dig into that. One of the first big lessons on this next slide is probably something we'd all agree is the number one enabler, the first big savior for the past 2 years, certainly when it all kicked off, has been cloud capability. You know, the moment that that working from home kicked in, the organization itself, you know, those organizations rather who hadn't taken that leap to the cloud, I think really had their work cut out to get there as quick as possible. That concept that the cloud brings of always on, available anywhere, available at any time was a huge lesson that for those people who maybe hadn't adopted, or those organizations that hadn't adopted it, was learned incredibly quickly. You know, the workforce suddenly became disparate. We're all disconnected effectively overnight, really. And I think technology was, as a whole, was an enabler of that reconnection of connecting back as, you know, as people. So emails became face-to-face calls, you know, the video calls, cameras always on. And I think that solves, as I say, the human factor. But data, you know, information is slightly different. I think it's fair to say that FP&A, to a lesser or greater, you know, a large extent, is really about collaboration. It's about sharing insights. It's about coming to a common consensus, gathering different opinions. It has to, sort of by definition, be connected across the organization. It's about connecting individuals. And I think that the cloud offerings really became the #1 choice when it comes to data. You also take, still speaking about the cloud for a moment, you know, you couple that with the lower overall total cost of ownership, the enterprise class security, integrated data across platforms on cloud, on premises, and I think that, you know, really results in anybody can continue to deliver the value regardless of where they are in the world, or you know, work is where you are. You know, I think it's a common tagline. So speaking a little bit about connectivity, I think these days cloud offerings are just as robust, if not, you know, arguably more robust than, say, on-premises capability, meaning that it's entirely conceivable and completely possible to get that holistic business model up in the cloud to be consumed by multiple individuals as that single point of contact, that single entity. Couple that as well with the ability for the cloud to be able to consume data, consume structure easily from other on-premises locations, other cloud locations, leads to, as I say, that single version of the truth that we're always going on about. It's ever elusive. But why is that important? Well, it makes the results more trustworthy. Therefore, we're making better business decisions, everything in one location. On the next slide here, it kind of echoes a little bit about, I think it echoes a little bit about one of Sebastian's slides. You know, when you look at the gamut of questions that you might be asking on this topic, from a technological standpoint, we're seeing, you know, cloud capabilities with more readily available APIs for easier integration points, process automation, all of that saving time, increasing reliability, access to big data, machine learning, artificial intelligence. That just all results in centralization. Again, that single version of the truth point is incredibly important. And, you know, that's underpinned by some of the fundamental capabilities that an FP&A solution, I think, is designed and delivered to support. It's all about supporting that decision making. It makes pivotal activities like scenario planning, for example, a really simple task, because these modern solutions with that always on capability have those rich features built in. Speaking about connections, so it's not just about connecting data and structure, it's also about people. So on this next slide, I've got an example of some collaboration, so some workflow. And the cloud offers that instant access to user communities across the organization. And you know, FP&A tools need to offer that capability to support that required collaboration. I think everyone, anyone who uses this capability should notice that you boost ownership, you increase visibility into the process. Who's doing what, where, when, where are we in the process? It automatically increases accountability. It creates participation. And I think the cloud, again, being ever present, you know, an email can be sent to the relevant task holder, making the whole process not just centralized, but also more reactive. And therefore, we as humans can respond in a timely fashion. I think that leads quite nicely to sort of the next big topic, which is agility. There's no question that when the pandemic hit, we were all taken, quite by surprise, copying Excel spreadsheets and doing our best to, what are we going to do? What's going to happen? And I think the idea of changing that perspective, that replan, that reforecast, is an incredibly common, or should be an incredibly common activity. On the next slide, we'll see an example of that, where we've got a number of different versions or the capability of comparing different versions and outcomes. And an FP&A tool in the cloud certainly enables that version creation to happen really at the speed of thought. This is all about us being able to respond to the ever-changing environment in which we find ourselves at the speed of the change itself. We talk about then a holistic model, so everything's connected. We can see the outcome of all of those what-if drivers really at a click of a button. What happens if this lever changes? What happens if this assumption goes up or goes down? How does that affect the rest of my organization? So having that centralized point that's always on, always accessible, I think really has been a lesson that's been learned. If we just, on the next slide, we're going to have a little look at another type of output, but I just wanted to take a moment to talk a little bit about forecasting. So, one thing is that what if, so responding to change. But, and I think Sebastian certainly brought this point up as well, is that we want to try and move towards that response to the change being kind of continuous. So we're able to tweak the direction that the organization's heading in based on information. So making sure all of our decisions are driven by data. Speaking about driving by data, I think my final slide here is all about then the outputs, that self-service capability. You couple that with the idea of a single centralized solution. The users are able to roll their sleeves up, start asking questions and understanding the information. That real-time analytics, Sebastian points out, is hugely important, hugely invaluable. So there's plenty more I could talk about. I suppose the main thing here is that we all need to be connected so that we're all facing the same direction. We're all aiming for that common goal. And I think that agility, that centralization automatically has these capabilities. So I think the final slide that I'll be speaking to for the time being are these three lessons, the main three lessons. Obviously, invest in cloud, that clearly would be one of the big lessons that we've all learned from the pandemic. Agility or an agile tool is the way forward, helping us to respond to that change. And connected platforms, the idea of having unification. The organization is not a collective of individuals. It is in fact one entity that interacts with itself. Speed is of the essence, I suppose, is the thing that I'd say there. So I believe that's the end of my my talk there. And apologies if I've run over slightly.
Hey, Oliver, thank you very much. Great presentation, and thank you for highlighting cloud, which has always been a lot of organizations' bugbear, and how important being in cloud has been, especially when you have people like Christina's organization as well as Sebastian's organization around the world, but having to work on all different sort of platform, how difficult that is, or just even scaling up. Lots of great example there. And more importantly as well is the agility of that tool, the ability of being able to play scenario and look at things, in very different ways at very, very regular time or real time as well. So thank you for sharing that. Let me ask our fellow panelists to come and join us as well. And we've got a question that Christopher would like to ask them as well. So what was the one key lessons learned as far as technology is concerned within your organization? So Christina, if you can join us as well, please. Sebastian, if I may start with yourself. Sebastian, you're on mute.
Sorry, one key lesson is that you really need to have this integrated platform, which is flexible, which can really help you to access information real time, but also run scenario analysis and allocate your resource in a more efficient way, especially in time of crisis, and it's valid for COVID and any type of situation. and it really provides you the flexibility you need to drive decision for the business.
Fantastic. I think you touched on that in your presentation as well. So thank you, Sebastian. Christina, your answer, please.
Yeah, I would actually have to agree with Sebastian. Having an integrated solution is critical to moving quicker and in a more agile environment, especially with more people working remotely and at home. It is so much easier to do solutions that are integrated. And also, I know Oliver made this point where, people thought, 20 years ago that the cloud was harder. It's actually easier. It provides more flexibility. It provides easier access to communication. So all of that is pretty much what, we see in our company.
Absolutely. So spot on there, Christina. I think the other thing, when I shared the maturity model at the beginning there, all the benefits of having an integrated platform, and then adding on to that predictive driver-based planning, and the end result being the agility you get with that to look at all these different scenarios in real time as well, is where we're heading really, and where we should head. Oliver, any closing comment on this? Oliver, sorry, any closing comment?
Sorry, I misheard you. It broke up slightly. No, I think, well, listen, you can tell I can talk for a week without stopping on this topic. But I think as an overview, certainly Sebastian, Christina's contribution so far, and to some extent, I hope mine as well, has really covered this this topic well. And I think we've really brought out all the lessons learned from all of these perspectives.
Fantastic. So thank you very much. Let us now quickly move to our key takeaways, anyway, that we are all here. So basically here, I'd like to ask you one key thing that you would like to highlight to people that we've learned from the pandemic, or what they should be doing, just in case there were anything similar to happen in the future. As we all know, change is the only constant these days. So Sebastian, what will be that one thing for you?
Yeah, I would say don't be afraid to try new things. And yeah, just go try. If it doesn't work, just adjust, fix. But don't contemplate the issues and the problem, but just go into it, and it could be much faster than what you think.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Christina?
I'd say also consider what you already have. So instead of just thinking about ways that something will not work and why we can't do it, understand that there's probably a million more ways why you can do it with all of the resources we talked about today.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Oliver?
Having just one is so very difficult. My mind is full with so many things. I suppose from my perspective, it's more about the technology and architecture. So connectivity, I think, is really important on all fronts. People connecting with each other, with the process, with the data connecting in turn with itself. So, the ability to pull data from various data sources. I completely agree, though, with the other comments, though. They're all FP&A mindsets. But connectivity, I think, would be my one sort of buzzword, if you like.
Thank you very much. And of course, we see the key points that you guys have made here on this slide, that we need an integrated platform which has to be driver-based, where we can play scenario management. And one key thing that Sebastian highlighted was it's about standardizing all your processes, getting rid of things that are no longer needed, and also the deliverables as well. And Christina, you went on to mention that as well. But the key thing from you was listen to your people, leverage existing resource and skill set, and then to close off, Oliver took us through agile platform, cloud, and connected platform as well. So thank you very much for that. Let us now move on to our exciting part, which is the Q&A session. I would like to remind our audience as well, we have 10 minutes or so for the Q&A session, but please keep sending your questions. We will answer a few of them today. The rest we will answer via email. So please keep sending them. So first question to Sebastian. Sebastian, if I may ask you, what does your planning platform look like? And what sort of data do you bring into your system? How do you do that?
No, I mean, in terms of integrating platform and the data from the system, so we're integrating a lot of finance information, of course, but I would say when we think about our predictive model, so it's about what external factors we need to bring in order to be able to forecast the future of our business and do scenario modeling. So it's about looking at our ecosystem and look at the drivers. What are the drivers that matter? And those drivers can vary by region. So if you think about our business, for example, which is a huge part of our business is also linked to restaurant, discotheques, and so on. So of course, the level of COVID restriction will have some impact. Inflation would be one of the key drivers when we are thinking about weather, but there are tons of other drivers. So it goes beyond, I would say, pure financial information when you start working on those predictive model. And it takes time, fine tuning. You do V1, V2, V3 until you get it right.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Sebastian.
And
great
one
answer.
thing which is quite interesting using the predictive model is that what we're saying is that as the first result, it's that the level of accuracy quickly gets better than when there was, I would say, maybe more human involvement in the process, which is quite interesting because you remove some of the human bias that you've got in the process.
And of course, also you take away all the amount of time that people in different places around the world would have spent in doing the same thing that predictive is doing and doing it better as well. Yeah.
Yes, and it learns as it goes. So the more data you've got, so the better it becomes.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that. So our next question is to Christina. Of course, thank you for taking us through, your learnings. What additional investment did Visa need to make during the pandemic to address people needs, resources, skills to perform in a remote environment? Was there a lot more resources pushed through?
Well, a lot of it was understanding. We talk about flexibility of work, and I didn't talk about that a lot, but that was one of the just foregone conclusions is that one, until we understand what's going on, like early 2020, we can't be around each other. So how do we make this work? And so the investment was in making sure that people had access in terms of their internet connections, in terms of ergonomically correct chairs. And, you have people working from home. You don't want them to be out with back issues because their settings aren't up. And those things seem small, but when you look at it over time, it really is an investment. So investment in things like that. Also investment in time and focusing our time, setting aside a specific task force to really focus on making work from home work, whether that is regular FP&A professionals like us, whether it's people in contact centers with, confidentiality concerns and things there. So making that stuff work really made a difference. So yeah, it was the logistical, I needed an additional monitor, I need a different chair, but there are also things from a security standpoint. There's a lot of investment made in our technology to make sure that the tools and things that we're using are secure. So I would say our security technology has really ramped up, and you'll see, like when I was trying to even send a deck to you guys for my Visa account, it was flagged because security is extremely tight, and we've really buckled down on that since we have been working remotely. So there's definitely been an investment in our technology as well.
Fantastic, great answers there, absolutely. And I think a lot of organizations, if not all the organizations we know, have had to go through all of these measures to just make sure things are working, people are working, people's health is carrying on, and invest where we should. Let's not forget, we have saved on other sides. Some organizations have closed sites as well because people are no longer working from offices, they're working from home. So it's a kind of a midway house, really, isn't it? So thank you for that, Christina.
I'll also say one more quick thing. We also had to invest in the offices for when people return. So things, increased cleaning, increased security and technology there, making sure that you have all the screenings. That's an increase on site as well.
Absolutely. There you go. Thank you very much for that. Our next question is, of course, to Oliver. Oliver, you know, Christina just mentioned security there, and it's a good question for you. How did your organization do or address data security working in a cloud environment? So basically, I think we're talking about, you know, how secure is cloud, or what are the issues, and how do we deal with it?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think cloud has come a long way since its inception, and you know, there's various sort of certifications that that organizations must adhere to make sure the data is secure, as it's, you know, secure in transit and at rest and so on. So, you know, any decent technology would support all of that capability when being in a cloud environment. And I think very much like Christina was saying, you know, this is a huge priority. Chief Data Officer these days, you know, we've got all of the GDPR and all of that is a very serious serious topic. And so, yeah, you know, the technology sort of responds to some extent, if that's the right way of saying it, to all of these needs and requirements. Technology that doesn't move with needs and requirements doesn't stay around for very long. So yeah, I don't know if that's the answer you're expecting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And of course, we talked about scalability. So, you know, and these are huge organizations that can also take so much more measures around security that smaller organization will not be able to invest that kind of money in security. So definitely,
yeah, of course.
Absolutely. So it's all about scalability. Right. I think we've got time for a quick question each again. So if we go around the house very quickly, Sebastian, what was the biggest challenge moving to a COE structure instead of having little teams everywhere around the world? A quick answer from you, please.
Challenge that you're bringing, I mean, a lot of variety of people into one platform, and then you move to standardize. So, I mean, of course, you've got internal resistance because everybody is okay to standardize as long as the others apply my own standards. So, which I would say it's the main challenge that we faced in 2021 and still early 22.
Fantastic. Yeah, great answer there. Thank you for that. Christina, a quick one for you. How do you measure wellness? And if there were any issues, how did you deal with it?
That's tough sometimes in FP&A because we want to see numbers, and you know, there's a pushback because how can we measure this? How can we measure this in numbers? So in addition to, we got rid of our annual employee survey and started doing pulse surveys. And then we implemented things like the state interviews where we could get qualitative feedback. And so we created some internal qualitative metrics to measure levels of engagement, wellness, and things like that.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. And finally, last question, Oliver, a quick one for you as well. How easy is it to adopt cloud technology? What should I do?
Well, yeah, adopting cloud technology is pretty straightforward. You know, I mean, it's typically the same type of software that you'd have internally. The difference is where's it hosted? You know, access is so much easier these days. It's a case of making sure that you've got a provider that supports the connectivity to the underlying important data sources. So, you know, direct to ERP, shared metadata, shared structure and data. But really, from that point on, I don't think there's any big sort of complexities these days of just going out and getting a cloud solution and creating the connectivity to the other sources, and away you go. I mean, it's the normal FP&A journey, but I'll spare you my thoughts on that for the time being.
No, you're absolutely spot on, because people always think it's a difficult step up to get into the cloud, but it's so easy, and you know, everything has been thought of that it's very easy to adopt. So thank you very much for that. Members of the panel, thank you very much for answering all the questions. That's all we've got time in terms of Q&A, but I'll still urge our attendees to keep sending them. We will answer them via email anyway. So stay on the webcam, ladies and gentlemen. We've only got a few more slides to kind of before we close. Just a quick one for you today is our FP&A Empowerment Survey 2022 is now online. Thank you for participating last year and the year before. So please give us 10 to 12 minutes of your time. The link is there. We would like to hear as to what you're doing, what you want to do within your organization as well. And then the next one here is our next upcoming FP&A Trends event, Digital North American FP&A Board, where we're going to talk about bridging the strategic gap once and for all, March the 8th. And then the second one is the future of business modeling, evolving from Excel to integrated FP&A, March 24th. So please keep that in your diary. Good time to say thank you to our Unit 4 technology sponsor, without which this wouldn't have been possible. So thank you, Unit 4. Members of the panel, Christina, Sebastian, Oliver, thank you for great presentations. You guys put through all the hard work, but also all the insight you gave us today via the Q&A sessions and the discussion points. So thank you very much. Audience, thank you very much for joining us, all the members of the FP&A Club as well, for making time for this meeting today. And here is my last slide, which is how you get connected with us. So I will now shortly close this meeting. Just a quick reminder that when I close, you will get a pop-up feedback form. So spend 30 seconds with us and give us that feedback, which will be excellent. So I hope you've enjoyed our webinar today, and the top 7 lessons learned during the pandemic will be helpful to you. Thank you very much. That's all we've got time for today. I bid you farewell. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and see you soon. Thank you very much. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye.